Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay.
Probably not having speakers, like I'll stop talking, but right now to get attention.
That's fair. All right, so we are on to our second half of our program. Can the gal who asked me to make a special announcement wave her hand? Okay, when we get to the end, I'll just wave around and I'll call you up. Okay, our next person is MJ Nordgren. She retired from family practice long enough. Is it on? Long enough ago that babies she delivered tower over her in the supermarket, eagerly relating their college antics and showing her pictures of their growing family. That happens to my mother all the time. She was a teacher. She counts her years as teacher and physician as a joyous privilege. When illness cut short her medical practice, MJ met and married a timberman. His stories of Swedish family homesteading through the Great Depression inspired her to write early. Is it called early, or is there a word missing?
Early.
Okay.
Logging Tales, Too Human to Be Fiction.
There you go. Early Logging Tales, Too Human to Be Fiction. Founder of Writers in the Grove, MJ is a teacher of writing in Forest Grove and Lincoln County, Oregon, and a speaker at writers' conferences in Texas and Oregon. 2 of her plays have been read at the Great Plains Theater Conferences in Omaha. Excerpts from 2 of her plays were read at the Willamette Writers Conference, so congratulations. Her articles and short stories have appeared in anthologies such as Cup of Comfort for Women, Classic Christmas, and Ink-Filled Page, and in magazines and newspapers. Online poetry and articles have appeared in 4 and 20 Poetry and The Writing Life by Jessica Morell. MJ is a recent award winner of the Oregon State Poetry Association. Very nice.
It was a very minor one.
It was amazing.
Don't bring your friends to these.
We're fans, not friends.
Oh. Tonight I'd like to read from Quiet Courage, mostly nonfiction. I can't vouch for some of them, but most of them are stories of friends or people that I got to know just by talking with them. I enjoy talking with people. This one is called Night Bag, and I've shortened it a little bit to fit into my 15 minutes. Larry, the first member of his rural Maine family to be going to college, has just returned his ice cream truck to the dairy where his father works. Larry has again worked late, knowing the gap between scholarships and the university expenses. In near primeval Maine, blackness, he walks home carrying 2 quarts of ice cream he promised his stepmother. He remembers watching his father park his delivery truck in front of their little house, drive their old Chevy about 50 yards beyond the van, and then come back and get into the delivery truck and put it in front about 50 yards. He would leapfrog, and that all to get him to the dairy, and then he could drive the Chevy home. He didn't like to walk up there. Larry had always thought that leapfrogging business was funny, but right now he can appreciate his father's ingenuity. On Old Shanken Road, the trees grow tall on both sides. Tall, meaning 80, 100 plus towering feet, and dense. They grow to within 6 feet of the sides of the road, only paved for the first time after Julius was born. Warmth still radiated up from the macadam, though already the air that had been kept shaded through most of the day was turning cool. Larry shifted the short stack of ice cream cartons to his right arm. They were cold. The moon gleamed on the straight 2-lane road, making it look like liquid mercury shimmering ahead. That was eerie enough. But when the moon shifted from directly overhead, Larry knew there'd be even weirder shadows roiling on each side of the road as the silver filtered through sighing, shifting branches. Larry shivered. A skittering in the bush immediately beside him made Larry jump. When he'd swallowed and could breathe easily again, he noticed a paper bag discarded in the ditch. That blackberry swirl ice cream was so cold on his arm that he'd shifted it a dozen times already, and he was only halfway home. Well, he thought, and being an athletic young man just out of high school, he leaped into the ditch, snatched up the bag, and dropped the cartons inside. It was a whole lot easier carrying the frozen treat suspended in paper. With renewed nonchalance, Larry loped the rest of the way and vaulted the rail fence as a shortcut across the yard to the front door. Ma had saved him a little of the stew, but only because I didn't put the whole pot on the table, Larry. Them kids gobbled up theirs, so you just be glad I saved some for you, she said. He was. After 13 hours selling and the brisk walk home, his gut growled aloud in anticipation. And you'll be glad too, Ma, he said, tossing the paper bag onto the formica table as he headed for the wash basin. Blackberry swirl. I saved you the last two. Oh, yeah? Ma's wide face broke into a smile over her several chins. Blackberry, huh? Larry? Julius's voice squeaked. And Larry looked over. The voice was not just that of a 14-year-old moving awkwardly into puberty. There was fear there. It's okay, Julie, Larry said low, moving between the boy and the table, where the bag was moving on its own. Ma had already backed against the front door, whimpering and waving her ladle in vaguely threatening patterns. The little kids scampered, squealing toward the living room where Pa, feet up on the coffee table, sat still holding his newspaper, but bending at the waist to peer around the corner into the kitchen. It's some sort of trick, Larry? You said it was ice cream. Don't I wish, Larry muttered. There was something in that bag, something alive that had already claimed the shelter before Larry had picked it up. Whatever it was, how big could it be, since he hadn't felt the extra weight and all? At least he hadn't registered the extra weight, but evidently he just discounted it as the difference between holding the ice cream suspended rather than on his arm. Oh boy, up in these Maine woods it could be just about anything. Where'd you get that there bag, Larry? Julie's older sister Bonnie asked from the living room, where two of the smallest kids clung to her. I bet it's a skunk, Agnes said from behind Bonnie. Whatever it is, get it out of here, Ma shrilled. But she wasn't moving away from the single door, and that was the only way out of the little house. Open the screen there in the corner window, Julie, Larry ordered low. Me? Julie's brown eyes were wide. Oh, yeah, okay, I guess so. To his credit, he moved toward the corner between Ma at the door and the formica table, where the bag was twisting and bulging. Larry glanced back at the living room. Pa had moved, but only to draw up his legs and sit up higher in the couch. The bag erupted. The movements inside the bag had been growing more frantic, and then the top 2/3 bent, and a long, sinuous line of fur emerged. Two small eyes glinted in the light of the electric bulb hanging from the middle of the ceiling, and then it was moving. It is a skunk! Agnes cried, bounding up the stairs to the children's attic bedroom. It's a weasel, Larry corrected. But that was only a shade more acceptable. Weasels can be vicious, like minks when they're cornered. Get the kids into Ma's bedroom, Larry shouted. Shut the door. So Bonnie scooped up the two and waddled to the far corner of the living room. But Pa was there ahead of her and slammed the door in her face. With a grunt, she hustled with her load up the stairs. Get something to block the top of the stairs, Agnes, she yelled. If the weasel started up there was nothing to hold it back. Throw me the broom, Julie. How Julius got to the broom and hurled it across the room before he made it to stand on the table, Larry couldn't fathom. But he was up and relatively safe, and Larry now had a weapon, or at least a herder. That left Ma, deathly pale, with whites showing all the way around the irises the way a horse does in panic. Ma was backed up against the door. The ladle was still waving in the air, now indefinitely more threatening, but just as useless patterns. The weasel darted to the nearest dark haven under the counter. Larry leaped across the room to block the door in the living room. He stood with the broom pointing at the counter floor. Ma, get up on the table with Julie's. But his stepmother, mouth open, said nothing. And she did nothing except gesture with the ladle. Ma, move! I'm going to try to sweep him out the door. When the long snout peeked at the base of the counter, Larry attacked with the broom, trying to direct the animal back away from the living room and the open staircase where the children cowered. The weasel ducked and ran. Larry swung at him with the broom. The weasel darted to its right, directly at Ma, who screamed, and threw the ladle. It swished by Larry's left ear and clattered into the wall behind him. Larry ducked and lost sight of the weasel. But Ma's scream brought his head up. He just caught sight of her round body bounding across toward the living room like an ejected balloon, where she collapsed on the floor in a dead faint. But her choice of direction had convinced the weasel to go the other way. There he was, back in the comparative open space of the kitchen, trembling under the table. Julie, grab something and stand at the living room door in front of Ma, Larry cried. But Julius was Pa's son, too. He wasn't moving. In the instant of slow motion, Larry reached for the door handle and opened it wide. Unfortunately, it swung into the kitchen. It wouldn't be a clean sweep from under the table directly to outside. The weasel could well get cornered behind the open door, and there was no telling what it would do if it felt completely trapped. Larry grasped the broom again with both hands. The weasel slunk down so it was a ribbon of fur and started back for under the counter. Larry was out of position. It could get to the living room with no one to block it. Larry extended that broom and swung, connecting with the animal just before it made it under the counter. Julius gasped and leaped from the table onto the chair in the far corner as the long, furred body hit the edge of the formica, slithered across, and crashed into the wall on the far side. The weasel lay stunned, but only for a moment. Larry wanted to go straight at it, but the table was in the way. He darted to the left, brushing by Julius, and got to the weasel as it lifted its head, shaking off the effects of its crash into the wall. It saw Larry coming and gathered its legs under it to flee the other way. If it got under that table, it would have clear sailing. Larry swung the broom like a batter going for a pitch, low and so far outside the coach would have had his head on a platter for even trying. But he connected. The weasel lifted into the air. Larry had aimed for the open doorway, but the weasel moved. It was a softball with corkscrew motion. But there was enough power behind that desperate swing that the animal was lifted and flung, not at the doorway, but out the window. Julius must have loosened that screen, or Larry had enough adrenaline behind the swing to take the weasel out, screen and all. Larry stood panting at the window, looking out at the silvery streak of fur taking off across the yard to the woods. Julius stood behind, his eyes nearly as wide as his mother's had been. "You done it, Larry! He done it!" Julius hollered to give the others the all clear. The two young men listened as Agnes and Bonnie on the stairwell. They heard Agnes bending over, assuring Ma as she groaned, waking up. They didn't hear Pa until he answered Julius's proud third, "He done it!" He done it all right. Claus sneered, blaming Larry for having brought in the weasel in the first place. Larry turned, ready to snap at Pa for hiding alone and leaving the children to fend for themselves. The words were in his mouth. His fists were clenched tight around that broom handle. He glared at this man and saw his fear naked, without the cloak of a child's born admiration for his father. For the first time, Larry saw him man to man, and what he saw made him turn away without answering. Sorry, he managed after a moment. It had been his fault. He should have checked that bag. Bonnie stood with the two littlest ones gathered around her at the living room door. She looked at her father and then at her half-brother. "Anybody for ice cream?" she asked. The children giggled. Larry peered at her, grateful and then sad. It would be her burden when he left, and college was only weeks away now. "Sorry," he said again. He slipped outside to pick up the screen, but mostly to stand a moment alone, looking at the moon and the stars and the blackness of Maine trees spearing into the